Hello, Mary Meet. So, a very nice new subscriber asked me about the materials of pendulums, and I gave her, I think it's a her, uh, reply under the video, but I wanted to make a whole video about this topic because it's something that I see a lot of people wondering about. And basically, and with all of these things, of course, I can only talk about my opinion on it because with a lot of esoteric topics, there are no hard, fast evidence. There are no, this is the only way and this is the proven way. It all has to do with what works for the individual. But I can say what I have experienced. Basically, it's very typical to have pendulums made either out of crystal or out of brass or copper. And there's some reasons for this. Basically, crystals, especially for example rock crystal, is very good with energies, and both brass and copper are conductive. So there's a very good reason for using these materials. But I would say that it really comes down to what do you prefer to work with, because really anything can be a pendulum. Pendulum basically is a weight on a string. That's all it is. And actually, one of the most classical folk magic uses of dowsing is that you wanted to try to find out the gender of a pregnant woman's child by threading her wedding ring on a hair and holding that over her pregnant belly. And if it usually, the idea that if it swung around in a circle, it was a girl, and if it made vertical slash, then it was a boy, though exactly the answers varied a little bit from area to area. And there has also been the idea that, for example, a woman could seek answers while sewing by basically dowsing with her sewing needle on a string. And in one of the pendulum books I read recently, and the author's favorite pendulum was basically you take a cork, a wine cork for example, you put a yarn needle through that because then you have a nice point, just put that on a string, you have a pendulum. So it doesn't have to be some sort of fancy material, it really is up to you. And one of the pendulums I use most right now, I cycle a bit through them, I have several pendulums, is this one. I like them really, really big. See here, yes, they know it. And this is plastic. It's basically 3D printed plastic. My husband designed this for me. It's an upside down essence symbol from alchemy. It's also used in a role playing game. So it's basically really a prop for a role playing game. But I figured out it had a nice weight to it, so I've been using it quite a lot. And this is plastic, some bit of metal, and some glass beads. I think this is glass as well. Yes, it's glass. So it's basically glass, a bit of nondescript metal, and plastic. And it works very, very well. So it really is up to you, because in the end of the day, it's just a tool. Now, of course, correspondences have their place. And that's really what these materials is. It's the idea that certain materials have certain spiritual qualities. So that some might be conductive, some has attuned to a particular thing. And I believe that correspondence can make things easier. Therefore, for example, I think that let's say you are doing a reading on love. Then having a rose quartz pendulum might make it easier, or a pendulum made of some other form of material that is attributed to love. And if you can have a heart-shaped rose quartz pendulum, it would be even better, because it then touch on all of these correspondences, and that can be quite powerful. But at the end of the day, it's you that are doing it. It's not the correspondences. The correspondences are there to help you, but they aren't necessary. It's a little bit, like I said, let's say you are trying to get a cart up steep, um, a steep hill. Basically not using any correspondences, you can just push it yourself. And generally speaking, unless it's way too heavy, and most of the time dowsing is not, you have no problem pushing that cart up yourself. But if you use correspondences, that is like having somebody else helping you push it up, or you have a horse before the cart, or a car that's pulling the cart, and basically you get help and it's much easier to get up the hill. So correspondences have their place, but it is much more important that you find a pendulum that really speaks to you. For me, for example, weight is important. I like heavy pendulums. So I have some really, really nice ones made of lignum vitae, which is a very, very dense, heavy woods. And I mean, I don't have them here right with me now, but the one I have had specially made is this big, and this has this diameter, and it's heavy. It's really, really big and heavy. But I'm not that fond of very, very thin, flimsy pendulums. But my mother likes them light. And also, I, generally speaking, prefer crystal pendulums to copper ones, while my mother preferred the copper ones. So it really is individual. I find that healing with pendulums, I prefer to use crystal pendulums because of it. You get the element of crystal healing in there, but I also think that you can easily do the same thing with a pendulum of any sort of material. It's really up to you. So, of course, being familiar with the correspondences might help. And the thing is, if you have a lot of, for example, fate in rock crystals, then that fate can help you when it comes to the readings, when it comes to getting results with your pendulum, because then you have more confidence in it. And that can be very beneficial. I will, like I said, let's have a look at some of the pendulums I'm using at the moment. Let's see. I have this one here. It's basically porcelain bait in a metal frame. The metal. It's nice. It's porcelain. I have rock crystal with basically that it's aluminum, isn't it? Basically, you treat it with a metal to get this rainbow sheen to it, and there are some stones on the string. It's basically, I'm not completely sure. It's I think both these lower ones are carnelian and tiger's eye. I'm not completely sure. I believe this is calcite. I believe that also is calcite and amethyst. Basically, yeah. It's just basically these are so small and cheap that it's a little bit hard to identify, but yes. It's called, I believe they're called rainbow quartz now, but it's not really a type of quartz. It's a form of treatment using metal, a metal layer. Now this one I use that quite a lot. It has the same basically stone string as the other one, but it's the pendulum part is plastic. So use that quite a bit. It's a little bit lighter than I prefer, but it's still a nice pendulum. So you can see there a lot of different materials. And like I said, I for some reason cycle through the pendulums I use a bit. It varies how much, what pendulums I like. And these are one of my all-time favorites. It's basically a radio tube. That's what I called it, radio tube. So these were, and it's just on a string. the handle. And for me, I really like this one because these radio tubes are designed to send electricity back and forth. So I feel they're very conductive, and it works very well for me. And with a little point, it's actually a really, really good pendulum. So that's one of my all-time favorites. And this one here, which I also use a lot. If the bag wanted to open, which is basically this fake stone. I'm not completely sure what it is called, but you will find them all over this. They're usually called cat's eye, but they aren't really cat's eye. They are a form of fiber optic glass. And it has a moon that you're holding it by. It's starting to get rather worn, I see. I've been using this a lot. It's a very nice weight to it. So it's basically, here we have some glass, porcelain, radio tube, plastic, crystal. It's really, for me, it's the weight and feel of the pendulum matters more than the particular material, unless I'm doing something particular. For example, let's say I am dowsing for something made of, locate something made of silver. I might use a silver pendulum or a compartment pendulum and put a bit of silver in there. Or if I'm dowsing for love, like I said, I might use a rose quartz pendulum. So basically, I might use something that has a correspondence that fit with what I'm dowsing for, but for the most part, for me, it's weight. Now, with the radionics, which is a type of it in alternative medicine, you have a system of dowsing where you use, what is it named? It's something rosette. I'm sorry, it's completely it has completely slipped my mind. This is not a system I generally work with. Basically, it's pendulum chart, and you have different colors around that chart. For example, ultra red, and wasn't it that? Basically, you have a color, and it's believed that each color has an energetic identity, and using a pendulum of the correct identity can help you both identify illness and cure it. And you might need specific materials and shapes of the pendulum. The shapes are very important to get it to resonate with that particular frequency that are signified on the rosette. But unless you're working with a system like that, the material really is up to you. And it really has to do with what do you prefer and what works for you. Like I said, for me, the shape and the feel of how the pendulum swings is much more important than the material it is made of. But it might be that for you, copper really works, or crystal really works, or wood really works. I'm very fond of wood pendulums because they often have a very nice weight to them. And then you have to basically, or it might be that a particular shape works for you, particularly you like round pendulums, or you like things with odd squiggly shapes. So it really depends on what works for you. There are no hard and fast rules that these are the best kinds of material for pendulums. Copper is very popular, so is crystals, because of their abilities to work with energies. And I would definitely say that if I were going to recommend somebody to get their first pendulum, and if they were going to have an only pendulum, I would say that I would recommend them getting either a copper pendulum or rock crystal one, because it basically will work with anything. And then they might expand their collection with more specific pendulums later. But I mean, I use my big chunk of plastic pendulum for anything also. So for me, it's only healing, crystal healing, basically with a pendulum, where I use almost exclusively crystal pendulums. Other than that, I go by weight and how it feels, but you might have something else with how it works for you. So I would say play around with different kinds of pendulums, try making some yourself, and find out what sort of pendulum works best for you and stick with that. Because that is bound to be a lot more effective than somebody else's idea of what the correct material is. So I hope this has answered your questions. Have a great day, and blessed be.